my 63rd birthday, my son drove me far into the countryside, stopped by an old, rundown shack and said, "This is your gift. You'll live here now." He left me deep in the woods, unaware of who lived in the house next door, a neighbor who was already on their way to help. Hello, dear listeners. Thank you for joining me. If you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe and hit the like button. I always love reading where you're listening from, so feel free to share your city or country in the comments. Now get comfortable and enjoy the story. Until recently, I believed my life didn't hold enough moments to fill a story. I had always lived quietly, almost invisibly. Even in the condo my late husband Paul and I bought decades ago, I slowly became part of the background, like a piece of furniture that's always there but no one notices anymore. For the last 10 years, that condo wasn't really mine. It belonged to my son Darren and his wife Tiffany, whose busy lives filled every corner. I stayed in the smallest room, the one that used to be a storage closet. My books, Paul's photos, and his old reading chair all ended up there, replaced by the sleek, bright decor Tiffany adored. I never complained. Why would I? All that mattered was Darren's happiness. Each morning was the same. I woke before everyone at 6, careful not to make a sound. I would quietly step into the kitchen, prepare grits for Darren, and brew 2 kinds of tea, strong black tea for him, and an imported herbal mix for Tiffany, the kind that always made my throat itch. I brewed plain black tea for myself and drank it alone in my room, staying out of their way. My Social Security check went directly into our joint account. "Mama, why do you need money?" Darren would say, avoiding my eyes. "We buy everything together." And I'd nod. He was right, I thought. I barely went out anyway, except for groceries or medicine. My clothes were old, passed down, but I didn't mind. My wishes had faded long ago into one simple hope: to see my son content. I remembered the day Tiffany needed a new designer handbag. I had been saving for cataract surgery, but she wrapped her arms around me and said, "Mommy, you understand, don't you? Darren's coworkers all have high-end families. I need to look the part. It's important for his career." Darren nodded at me with gratitude, so I handed over the money. After that, I just started buying stronger reading glasses instead. My opinions no longer mattered. If I said the soup was too salty, Tiffany would smile tightly and reply, "Mama, you're just getting older. Your taste buds aren't the same." If I tried offering advice from experience, Darren would interrupt gently. "Things are different now. Mama, we'll handle it." And they did, without me. I became the cook, the cleaner and the interest-free bank, a quiet presence that was useful, but never needed. In the evenings, I often sat in my chair staring at Paul's photo. "Paul," I'd whisper, "did we raise our son right? He's a good boy, isn't he? Maybe this is just how life works now." The photo never answered, but I convinced myself I was doing the right thing. A mother should give everything for her child, shouldn't she? So, when my 63rd birthday arrived, I expected nothing more than any other day. Maybe a small bunch of daisies, my favorite flowers, or a box of dark chocolates I loved so much. That morning, Tiffany was unusually affectionate. She hugged me tightly and said, "Happy birthday, Mom. Darren and I have a gift for you. You'll be amazed." I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't known in years, that childlike spark of excitement before a surprise. Darren, too, seemed restless, constantly checking his watch. "Get ready, Mom," he said. "We're going to pick up your gift." I dressed in my best outfit, a simple gingham dress with tiny flowers, the only one still presentable. When I looked in the mirror, I saw an old woman staring back, weary, but with eyes that, for once, looked alive. Tiffany stayed home, claiming a headache. "You two go ahead," she said, waving us off. "You can tell me all about it later." We drove for a long time. The city faded into suburbs, then into long, empty stretches of road. I tried asking Darren where we were headed, but he just muttered, "It's a surprise, Mom. You'll see." So, I fell silent and stared out the window. My unease grew. This didn't feel like a drive to a spa or a vacation spot. The scenery turned bleak, barren fields, dark woods. Eventually, we turned onto a cracked dirt road that jolted the car so hard it made my teeth rattle. All around us were fields swallowed by weeds and crooked poles leaning like old bones. Then a small, ruined village appeared, a few half-sunken houses, weathered black by time. None looked habitable. Darren stopped in front of what could barely be called a house, more of a shack, its roof sagging, windows nailed shut, and a fence rotting in the tall grass. "We're here," he said flatly, turning off the engine. I just stared. This couldn't be real. Surely it was a mistake, or some kind of cruel prank. He got out, opened the trunk, and pulled out my old weekend bag, the one I hadn't used in decades. It held a change of clothes, a robe, and a bar of soap. Setting it by the weeds, he gestured toward the shack. "There you go, Mom. This is your gift. Tiffany and I bought you your own little place in the country. Fresh air, peace, it'll be good for you." His words hit like stones dropping into a well. I looked at him, my son, but couldn't recognize the man standing there. His face was cold, his eyes empty, tired, detached. "Darren," I managed, my voice trembling. "What is this? Why?" "Mom, don't start," he said sharply. "This is what's best for everyone. You need some rest, and we need space. Tiffany's pregnant." He said it like it explained everything, like that made it right. He didn't meet my eyes, just hurried back into the car and slammed the door. I stood there on the dirt road, watching him through the windshield. When the engine roared to life, something shifted deep inside me. It wasn't anger or sorrow or betrayal. It was something colder, sharper. It felt like a lock turning inside my chest. Click, and all the love that had once lived there froze solid into something clear and still. Ice. The car pulled away, raising a storm of dust. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply watched the silver car grow smaller until it disappeared beyond the bend. The air grew still again. The smell of exhaust faded. All that remained was me, my old bag, that broken house, and a silence so heavy it felt alive. But in that silence, for the first time in years, I heard myself, not as a mother or an inconvenience, but as Evelyn Reed, and she spoke to me, calm and sure. That's enough. I understood then. This wasn't the end. It was a beginning. My life was mine again, and I would reclaim it myself. The dust from Darren's car settled on the roadside weeds. I stood still, listening until even the faint hum of the engine vanished. Then came the kind of silence I hadn't known since childhood. But this one was different. That old silence used to be alive, full of crickets and rustling leaves. This one was hollow, suffocating. Slowly, I turned toward my so-called gift, the weathered shack with its leaning porch and broken step. Through the gap, I could see rotting leaves from last year. Wild vines and weeds surrounded it like a tangled graveyard. It was a place forgotten by time, and by everyone. A place I had been left to disappear in, but I felt no tears. Inside I was dry, empty, but awake. That cold, sharp click inside my chest froze everything that could have spilled out as tears. Despair had been left behind somewhere, in the car that had taken my son away. Now, on this abandoned patch of land, it was just me and a ringing clarity echoing in my head. I walked up to the porch, automatically stepping around the broken plank, and set my bag on what was left of the wooden edge. My eyes scanned the decay before me, but my thoughts were already far away, in my clean, bright 3-bedroom condo on Peachtree Road, where Tiffany was probably deciding what color curtains to hang in my former room. That was the word that lingered. The sight of this battered, crippled house brought back something I had tried not to remember for years, afraid it might tempt fate. I recalled the words of my late husband, Paul. We were sitting in this very kitchen 10 years before he passed, and he was serious, unusually stern, as he placed some documents in front of me. "Evelyn," he said, looking straight into my eyes, "I'm going to the attorney tomorrow to transfer my share entirely to you. You'll be the sole owner." I had waved my hands then, asking, "Why, Paul?" "We're a family. We have a son." He shook his head. "A son is one thing, but life is unpredictable. You're all I have, and I need to make sure you'll always have a roof over your head. Yours and no one else's." I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but I followed through as he asked. After his death, all the documents were filed in my name, Evelyn Reed, the sole rightful owner. Darren never knew this. He assumed the condo was a joint inheritance that would eventually be his. I never corrected him. Why would I? It seemed unnecessary, a sign of mistrust toward my own son. How wrong I was. Then another memory surfaced, one even more important. About 5 years ago, I received a letter about an inheritance. A third cousin from Birmingham, Alabama, someone I'd met only once as a child, had passed away. She was alone, without children, and had left me her modest one-bedroom apartment. I handled all the paperwork, sold the apartment quickly, and placed the full amount into a separate savings account. I didn't mention it to Darren or Tiffany. They were busy taking out a large loan for a new car. I knew exactly what would happen if they learned about the money. It wouldn't be stolen, just spent. It would vanish into urgent needs, status, and their future, just as my savings, retirement income, and health had already vanished. So I kept quiet, not out of greed, but out of a long-dormant instinct for self-preservation. That account became my untouchable reserve, my final line of defense, something no one knew about. These thoughts passed through my mind not as vague memories, but as vivid facts, like a light switching on in a dark room, revealing everything I still had. I opened my bag. Darren must have packed it hastily. An old terry robe, slippers, towels, a bar of laundry soap. And at the bottom lay my salvation, an old flip phone that Tiffany mocked as a grandma phone. They had bought it for me years ago, just to stay in touch. It was simple, no internet, no features, but its memory held the most valuable numbers in the world. I pressed the power button. The battery was almost full, always charged out of habit, but the screen showed no signal. My heart fluttered for the first time. Was it all for nothing? The town lay deep in a valley. I needed higher ground. Without hesitation, I followed an overgrown path leading up a small hill. Thistles snagged my skirt. Branches scratched my face, but I didn't notice. My eyes were fixed on the phone, as if it were a compass. Finally, at the top, beside a crooked cedar tree, 2 faint signal bars appeared. Enough. I found the number in the contacts. Mr. Harrison, the bank manager. He was about Paul's age, and had known us since we opened our first account together. I pressed call. After several long rings, a familiar, tired voice answered. Hello? Mr. Harrison, it's Evelyn Reed, I said, my voice calm and steady. Evelyn. Good afternoon. How can I help you? He sounded surprised. I hadn't called him personally in years. Mr. Harrison, I need you to do a few things for me right away, I said. I'm listening. First, block all powers of attorney and access to my accounts in my son Darren Reed's name. Everything, no exceptions. A pause followed. Are you sure, Evelyn? Absolutely, I said firmly. Second, redirect all my retirement deposits from the joint account to my personal savings account, the one I opened 5 years ago. Do you remember it? Yes, of course. I'll take care of it. And third, I continued, block his access to view any of my account balances. From now on, all operations require my direct confirmation. Personal confirmation only. I understand, Evelyn. It'll all be done within the hour. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Goodbye. I ended the call. The first step of the plan was complete. Now for the second. I scrolled to another number. Marcus Jones, attorney. He'd helped me with my cousin's inheritance. A sharp, dependable young man. He answered almost immediately. Marcus Jones, attorney at law. Marcus, hello. It's Evelyn Reed. We worked together on the Birmingham case. Mrs. Reed. Of course. Has something happened? Something has, I said calmly. I need your help regarding my condo on Peachtree Road. I want to officially confirm my sole ownership and block any potential claims, including from my son. He paused briefly, thinking. Understood. You want to secure your property completely? That's wise. Send me a copy of your ID and the property documents, and I'll start right away. I can prepare a cease and desist if necessary. I can't send anything right now. I'm out of town and the papers are in the condo, but can you begin by checking the county records and gathering all related files? Yes, absolutely. I'll start immediately. You can count on me, Mrs. Reed. I am counting on you. Thank you. I lowered the phone. The cold in my chest was still there, but it had changed. It was no longer shock. It was steel, cold and sharp, ready for use. I walked back down the hill. The house looked different now. It wasn't a grave anymore. It was a temporary headquarters, a quiet base from which I would wage my quiet war. Meanwhile, I knew that in my condo, Darren and Tiffany were likely celebrating, drinking champagne, proud of how neatly they'd gotten rid of me. Now we can finally start the renovation and live like real people, Tiffany would say, smug and satisfied. They thought they had won. They didn't realize the war had already been lost. I stood on the threshold of my refuge and took my first deep breath in years. The air smelled of damp wood and decay, yet it felt clean, free. For hours I sat on the porch, watching the overgrown yard as the sun set in soft watercolor shades. The air smelled of wet leaves and soil, something raw, untamed. The city never smelled like this. It reeked of gasoline, dust, and other people's urgency. But here time stood still, quiet and frozen, like this forgotten town itself. When darkness fell and the cold crept under my thin dress, I knew I had to move. Sitting wouldn't warm me or quench my thirst. The cold in my chest gave me strength, but my body still had needs. I stepped carefully across the creaking boards and entered the house. Inside, the air was thick and heavy with dust, wood, and thyme. Pale moonlight slipped through cracks in the boarded windows, drawing ghostly lines on the floor. I turned on my phone's flashlight. The faint beam revealed a chipped stove, a table covered in years of dust, and an overturned stool. I felt no fear, only a calm, practical curiosity, as if I were taking over from a careless owner. There were 2 rooms. One held a sagging iron bed. The rusty spring creaked faintly. The other bed was empty, with only a few rags left in the corner. Every step made the old floor groan, but it held firm. The house was ancient yet solid, aged but not broken. It hadn't collapsed. It had simply gone to sleep. My first goal was water. I stepped outside, flashlight in hand, scanning the property. Then a small miracle. Behind the house, hidden among nettles, stood an old well. Its wooden frame was dark with age, and the heavy oak windlass still hung in place. The chain was rusted but whole. I struggled to turn the handle. It squeaked and groaned, but the chain began to lower. Moments later, I heard a dull splash. Water. I had found water. It was my first small success. On the porch, I discovered an old galvanized bucket, somehow untouched by rust. After several tries, I managed to draw up a full bucket. The water was icy cold and smelled of silt, yet it was clear. Carrying it back inside, I felt the strain in my back from the unfamiliar work. The next 2 days passed in steady labor. I didn't think about Darren or Tiffany. My world had shrunk to this house and the yard around it. I found an old saw and axe in the shed, chopped dry branches from a fallen apple tree, and started a fire in the stove. At first, smoke filled the room, but soon the chimney warmed, and a steady draft filled the house with life and warmth. I found old newspapers and rags, scrubbing the table and floors until the wash water turned black. From the shed, I carried dry straw, stuffed it into an old mattress from the attic, and softened my bed. I felt like Robinson Crusoe, isolated but calm. The physical work cleared my thoughts. Every evening I climbed a nearby hill to catch a faint signal. 2 bars, my thin link to the outside world. I didn't call anyone. I waited. I knew they would call. It happened on the 3rd evening. I was on the porch, finishing a cup of herbal tea made from currant leaves I'd found in the yard. Suddenly the phone rang, sharp and jarring in the quiet. Darren's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring a few more times before answering. Inside, I was completely calm. "Yes," I said. "Mama, finally. Where have you been? I've been trying to call for an hour." His voice carried that same impatient tone I knew too well. "I haven't been walking, Darren. Just breathing. There's plenty of air here," I replied evenly. "Okay, so, how are you settling in?" he asked, sounding like someone checking off an unpleasant duty. "Little by little. Thanks for asking," I said. My quiet irony went unnoticed. "Listen, Mama," he continued. "Something happened. Tiffany's card didn't work at the store, the one linked to your account. There's definitely money in it. I checked this morning. You didn't press something by mistake, did you? Maybe it's a bank glitch. Could you call them? Ah, there it was, the first small crack in their easy confidence. I stayed silent and let him continue. You should call and tell them everything's fine. Tiffany's upset. She was trying to buy a dress. I pictured the moment, my daughter-in-law standing in a fancy boutique, handing over my debit card that had always received my pension, and seeing the word declined appear. Her surprise, then her indignation. How dare it fail? Mama, are you listening? Darren pushed. I hear you, I said quietly. Then I caught the faint sound of him covering the phone, but not quite enough. He murmured to someone nearby. I don't know, she's just quiet, sitting there. And then came Tiffany's voice. Sharp, cold, unmistakable. Why are you even talking to her? She's pretending. Trying to act tough now. What, hurt her pride? Let her stay out there in the middle of nowhere without a cent. She'll call soon enough. Tell her to stop being stubborn. I need that dress. Darren's voice came back, lower, hesitant. Tiff, wait. What, wait? She cut in. The guy for the kitchen estimate is coming tomorrow, and we haven't paid the property tax yet. She sent a text today about the debt. Did she disable it from her grandmother's phone too? Senility is setting in, I swear. We shouldn't have bought her a house. We should have been searching for a nursing home instead. Senility. A show. Sits without a dime. Those words didn't hurt me. They were simply confirmation. A final diagnosis. They validated everything I had come to understand that day. Darren had left me standing on that road, and in their eyes, I wasn't a person anymore. Not even a mother. I was just a function. An object. Like an old piece of furniture that had started to malfunction. And they weren't trying to fix it. They were just upset that it no longer worked as it used to. That faint sliver of hope buried deep in my soul, the part that wondered if I had been too harsh, if I had misjudged them, disappeared completely in that moment. The ice in my chest hardened, colder and heavier than stone. The rustling returned through the phone, and Darren's voice grew clear again, directed sharply at me. Mama, are you there? So, will you call the bank? I took a slow breath. The air felt cool and crisp. No, Darren, I said softly, but with unmistakable clarity. What? You can't or you won't? He asked, disbelief thick in his voice. Figure it out yourselves, I replied. I ended the call and slowly placed the phone down, staring for a long time at the darkening yard outside. The anger was gone. What remained was a cold, steady calm, the kind that comes when everything becomes clear. They had judged themselves without realizing it. They believed this was just another one of my small rebellions, some emotional display. They couldn't see that it wasn't a performance at all. This was the end, and the curtain was falling on them now. Days began to blend together, each one absorbed into a quiet but meaningful rhythm. I stopped keeping track. 4th day, 5th, maybe 6th. It didn't matter anymore. Out here, time wasn't measured in numbers but in tasks. A swept floor, a full bucket of clean water, the first soft fire in the stove, filling the house with that long-forgotten smell of warmth and smoke. My anger, the kind that had sparked back on that dusty road, had settled deep inside me. It didn't disappear. It simply sank lower, becoming dense and solid, forming a kind of foundation. I no longer thought about Darren or Tiffany. My thoughts turned inward toward myself. It was a strange and unfamiliar feeling, rediscovering who I was without them. On the 2nd day, I decided to explore the attic. I climbed the unsteady wooden ladder, expecting nothing more than clutter and cobwebs, and that's mostly what I found. But in the farthest corner, beneath a pile of old burlap sacks, there was a small wooden chest. It wasn't locked. I brushed off the thick dust, which floated up into the narrow beam of sunlight leaking through a hole in the roof, and lifted the heavy lid. Inside, carefully arranged on a faded yellow cloth, were bundles of letters tied with twine and a large photo album wrapped in worn velvet. I carried it downstairs, sat on the porch, and opened it. Faces stared up at me, men in old military uniforms, women in simple scarves, smiling children, wedding photos, gatherings in open fields. A lifetime lived within these walls was captured in those fading images. I didn't know these people, yet I felt connected to them. They had lived, worked, loved, and raised families on this same ground. Turning the pages, I couldn't help but think of my own album, the blue one left behind in the city. It held pictures of Paul and me, our wedding, Darren's birth, his first day at school, his college graduation. There we were by the ocean. Darren still a little boy building sandcastles. And there was Paul and me, just the two of us, sitting in the park a year before he passed away. That apartment, my condo, wasn't just a place to live. It was a piece of my life. Every cup, every book, every scuff on the floor was a memory, a line in my story. The thought that strangers now lived there, people with no connection to what it meant, hurt more deeply than I expected. I realized this wasn't just about property. I was fighting for my history, for the right to my own past. That evening, I climbed up to the small hill where I usually got a phone signal and decided to call my lawyer, Marcus Jones. I didn't expect fast results. Cases like mine took time, but I needed to know things were moving forward. He answered right away, as though he'd been waiting for me, but his tone wasn't the same. It was tight, uneasy. "Mrs. Reed, good evening," he said. "I'm glad you called. I was just about to reach out to you." "Is something wrong, Marcus?" I asked. My heart, calm until then, skipped uneasily. "Let's just say we've run into some complications," he replied carefully. "I made the preliminary checks we discussed. The condo on Peachtree Road is legally yours. Your ownership is clear and uncontested." "Then what's the issue?" I asked quickly. He hesitated. "Mrs. Reed, there's an encumbrance on your property." The term meant nothing to me. "What does that even mean?" "It means," he began slowly, "that your ownership may not be as free of restrictions as it appears. There are certain restrictions currently placed on your property. It cannot be sold, gifted, or otherwise transferred until this encumbrance is cleared." "What encumbrance? Where did it come from?" A chill crept back over me, but this time it felt different. Uneasy, sharp. Then the lawyer said something that split my world in two, before and after. His tone was calm, almost offhand, yet the words struck like an explosion. "Mrs. Reed, your condominium is being held as collateral by a commercial bank. A mortgage agreement for a very large amount has been filed against it." I froze. I couldn't breathe. The air seemed trapped in my throat. "Collateral mortgage? How? When?" That was all I could say. "The agreement was signed 8 months ago," Marcus replied. 8 months. Instantly, an image flashed through my mind. Last winter. I remembered it vividly. I was seriously ill, pneumonia. For 2 weeks I lay with a high fever, drifting in and out of delirium. Darren was at work most of the time, and Tiffany took care of me. She was attentive, always nearby, bringing me soup, changing my compresses, running to the pharmacy, and constantly sorting through papers. "Mom, these came from the tax office. You need to sign them before the deadline. Don't get up. I'll bring them to you." "Mom, this one's just for the HOA. A simple formality. Just initial here." I remember her slipping the papers under my hand. My vision was blurry. The words swam before my eyes from weakness and fever. I trusted her. She was my son's wife, my family. I signed without reading, just wanting her to leave so I could fall back into the haze of sleep. "Marcus," I said, my voice trembling before I steadied it. "Is my signature on those documents?" "Yes, Mrs. Reed," he replied. "According to the file, you personally acted as the borrower. The signature was notarized, but I've already requested copies. I didn't need him to finish. I understood everything. This wasn't just forgery. It was worse. It was betrayal during my most vulnerable moment. They hadn't only deceived me, they had taken advantage of my illness, my trust, and my helplessness. While I struggled for every breath, they were calmly placing a financial trap beneath my hand. "How much?" I asked. My voice sounded cold, metallic. Marcus named the amount. It was enormous, almost equal to the value of the condo itself. Money I could never earn back, not even in several lifetimes. Something inside me broke then, the last fragile thread that tied me to my belief in people, in family, in my son. It didn't just snap, it disintegrated. Suddenly, everything became clear. Their plan wasn't simply to take my condo. It was far more cruel. They had borrowed a massive amount of money using my home, my only asset, as collateral. They spent it, or planned to spend it, on their comfort, a new kitchen, clothes, vacations. And when the time came to repay, they'd let the bank seize the condo. They had moved me to this remote place not out of care but to keep me away, so I wouldn't interfere or find out until it was too late. This broken-down house wasn't a gift. It was meant to be my grave, a place for me to quietly disappear while they finished consuming what was left of my life. The pain, the disappointment, the sadness, it all vanished, replaced by a sharp, righteous fury. It wasn't mere anger anymore. It was the clarity one feels when they see pure wrongdoing and know they must fight it, not for revenge, but for justice. For the memory of my husband who always wanted to protect me, and for myself. "Marcus," I said firmly into the phone, "I understand now. Do everything necessary. Get all the documents. Prepare the lawsuits. We'll fight this." "I've already started, Mrs. Reed," he answered. "I'm on your side." "I know," I said quietly, and hung up. I walked down the hill. The sun had already set, but I could see everything around me with strange, sharp clarity. Every blade of grass, every stone. The world hadn't changed. I had before, I only wanted to reclaim what was mine. Now, I knew I had to go further. They had awakened something in me I didn't know existed, and they would regret it. The discovery of the mortgage didn't destroy me. It forged me, like steel tempered by fire and ice. All this time, I thought I was fighting for my past, for memories and fairness. But now I understood. I was fighting for my future, for the right to live freely. The next few days passed in a blur, not from despair but from focused determination. I stopped caring about discomfort, the creaky bed, the cold water, the old canned food from the cellar. None of it mattered. My body worked on instinct, while my mind ran like a precise machine. I cleaned the room with the stove until it shone. I found an old wooden table in the attic, scrubbed it, and made it my command post. Every evening I climbed the hill, not just to call Marcus, but to hold our war councils. He became my eyes and ears in the city, in the world I no longer belonged to. "Mrs. Reed," he said one night, calm and professional. "We've filed a complaint with the district attorney for mortgage fraud. I also notified the bank and attached your medical records from the time the agreement was signed. They're required to begin an internal investigation." "Good," I said. "What's next?" "Next, Mrs. Reed, we wait. The first move has been made. Stay busy. They'll expose themselves soon." And I did stay busy. I found an old shovel in the shed. I went to the shed and began turning over a small patch of earth in front of the house, clearing years of weeds. The work was exhausting. The soil was compacted, and the thistle roots ran deep. Yet with every root I pulled, I felt myself freeing more than just the earth. I was freeing my own soul. I was uprooting my past, my blind love, my self-sacrifice. It was painful, but it had to be done. Then, on the 5th day after our conversation about the mortgage, the bombshell arrived. In the evening, I spoke with Marcus as usual, but his voice had changed. There was a subtle note of restrained triumph. "Well, Mrs. Reed," he began without preamble, "the ice has broken. This morning, a courier delivered a certified letter to your old address for your son and his wife." I pictured the scene. Morning light, coffee on the counter, them discussing cabinet colors, a knock at the door. They sign for the envelope, open it casually. "What was in the letter?" I asked. "An official notice from me as your legal representative," Marcus said. "It confirms your full and sole right to the condo. Any attempt to transact business with it will be legally blocked. Most importantly, it demands that they provide an explanation within 24 hours regarding the mortgage agreement, which we assert was fraudulently executed." I absorbed his words in silence. "But that's not all," he continued. "This morning, the bank's security department, after receiving my documents, reacted decisively. All accounts your son had access to, including credit cards and joint savings, have been frozen pending investigation. Mr. Harrison personally oversaw it." "Frozen?" I murmured. What a precise word. Their world, built on my money and their betrayal, was encased in ice. "Did they try to fight it?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Oh yes," the lawyer chuckled. The bank called me first. Your son stormed in, screaming, demanding, threatening. When they calmly explained that he wouldn't receive a cent until the investigation concluded, he turned pale and left. An hour later, his wife arrived, furious, demanding to see the manager, shouting about consumer rights and threatening legal action. They politely showed her the door. Their world is collapsing faster than they expected. I sat on the hilltop, wind whipping through my hair, looking at the abandoned town and the dark silhouettes of the houses. I felt no malice, only a sense of restored order. Justice isn't revenge. It's simply returning everything to its rightful place. Then my phone rang, Darren's number. I hung up with Marcus and answered. "Mama, what did you do?" It wasn't my Darren's usual soft, slightly condescending voice. This was a high-pitched shriek, full of terror. I stayed silent. We got some papers from an attorney. The bank blocked all the accounts, everything. We don't even have money for groceries. Did you decide to ruin us? His voice was frantic, panicked. In the background, Tiffany's sobs erupted. Not quiet, bitter tears, but loud, dramatic, hysterical wails. "Do you understand what you're doing?" he cried. "Tiffany is sick. She can't handle stress, and you're trying to destroy our lives over your old age spite." "I didn't do anything, Darren," I said softly, calmly. The contrast between his screaming and my quiet voice seemed to stun him. He fell silent. "You did all this? You and your wife. What? What did we do? We gave you a gift, bought you a house, and this is how you repay us? You tried to steal my condo, Darren. You took out a mortgage on it while I was ill. You left me here so I wouldn't find out until the bank took my home. That's what you did." Silence followed, deep, heavy, as still as the town itself. I could hear only his ragged breathing. He hadn't expected this. He assumed I knew nothing, that it was all about hurt feelings, a show. But it wasn't. It was a verdict. "Mama," he finally rasped, a pitiful, fawning tone creeping in. "Mommy, this is all wrong. It's a mistake, a misunderstanding. We'll explain everything. How about you call it all off? Withdraw the papers. We'll come and talk." "Come on," I said. "Over," I said. "Really?" Hope crept into his voice. "You'll call it all off?" "No," I replied. "Come on over. I'm waiting for you." I hung up. That was it. Now they knew. This wasn't a tantrum or hurt feelings. It was war. And they knew I had uncovered their darkest secret. Panic would turn to despair, and despair pushes people toward irrational actions. I walked down the hill. The night was dark, but I moved with certainty. I knew they would come, and I was ready. They arrived the next day, just before noon. I heard them long before I saw them. The roar of an engine tearing through the quiet of this small town. The screech of tires stopping abruptly next to my house. Dust rose in a cloud, settling on the wild currant bushes. I didn't move. I remained on the same porch where they had abandoned me days before, peeling small potatoes with an old knife. Tiny ones, the size of quail eggs from the overgrown garden. My lunch. The car door slammed. Darren jumped out first, pale and haggard, dark circles under his eyes. His expensive shirt was crumpled, as if he'd slept in it. Tiffany followed more slowly. Her face was puffy, makeup smeared, but she held her head high, wearing her familiar look of disgusted superiority. They stopped a few feet from the porch, staring. I didn't look up, continuing to peel the potatoes. The task grounded me, keeping my emotions in check. I was not a participant in this drama, only an observer. "Mama," Darren began, his voice hoarse and pleading. He stepped forward, extending his hands as if to hug me. I didn't pull away. I kept my gaze on my hands. "Mommy, what is this? Why are you doing this to us?" I dropped the peeled potato into a bowl of water and picked up the next. "I was waiting for you," I said, still without looking up. That simple reply threw him off. He expected shouting, tears, accusations, anything but this cold, calm detachment. We came to talk," he stammered. "Mama, this is all some terrible misunderstanding. We're family. Families help each other, not sue each other." His words were correct but empty, lacking sincerity. Only fear filled them, fear of losing what he thought was his by right. Tiffany's patience snapped. She stepped forward, pushing Darren aside. "Enough with this circus," she hissed. Her face twisted with anger. Have you completely lost your mind? Go feral in the sticks? What right did you have to block our accounts? Who gave you that right? Her thin, harsh voice attacked my ears. Do you even realize what you've done? She continued, pointing a perfectly manicured finger. You're embarrassing us. We had to cancel the kitchen order. People are laughing at us. I'm not supposed to be stressed. The doctor forbade it. I'm carrying your grandchild, and you're driving us into poverty. She played her ace, the pregnancy. In the past, that would have made me cave instantly. Not now. My chest remained icy and still. I slowly lifted my eyes to her, staring long and intently, as one looks at something unpleasant. She faltered, silent for a moment, then regained composure, her face flushed with anger again. Darren tried again. Mama, Tiffany is right. You can't be nervous. Please, let's resolve this. We know we were wrong. Maybe the house wasn't the best gift, but we'll fix it all. Call your lawyer. Tell him you've changed your mind. Here, take my phone. As if it were that simple. One call, and all their lies, all their betrayal, would vanish. I put the knife and last potato in the bowl, wiped my hands on my apron, and stood slowly. Now I was on the same level as them, a step above on the porch. You want me to call it all off? I asked quietly. Yes, Mommy. Darren nodded. Tiffany watched defiantly, lips pressed tight. So I can give you my retirement money, my condo, my life again. Don't exaggerate, Mama, Darren grimaced. The condo is ours together, and we'd always take care of you. Like you took care of me when I was sick? I asked softly. The silence that followed was deafening. They froze. Tiffany instinctively stepped back. I remember everything, Tiff, I said, using her nickname for the first time in years. I remember you by my bedside, your caring hands. And I remember the papers you slipped me, claiming they were for taxes, for the HOA, just a formality. Tiffany's face went pale. Her rage, her confidence, it all vanished. Only fear remained. Darren looked between us, confused. Mama, what are you talking about? Darren, the mortgage, I said slowly, enunciating each word. The big mortgage you took out 8 months ago, using my condo as collateral, my signature obtained when I was delirious. Did you think I'd never find out? That I'd quietly die here and the bank would take my home for your debts? The words hit hard. Darren staggered as if punched. He looked at Tiffany in horror. She looked at her expensive shoes now stained with dirt. All their manipulation crumbled. They stood exposed in greed and lies. The masks were gone. The show was over. So Darren, I continued in a quiet, steady voice, do you still want me to call the lawyer? He couldn't speak, opening and closing his mouth like a stranded fish. Tiffany hunched her shoulders, turning from predator to cornered animal. The pause was long, heavy. In that silence, the last drop of maternal love for him died, buried next to the rotten porch. Leave, I said. Not a command, not a request, just fact. They turned silently, not looking at each other, like puppets with cut strings. They trudged to their expensive car, started it tiredly, and slowly drove away. I remained alone on the porch, the bowl of peeled potatoes beside me, my lunch, my new life, the air around me clean. Silence fell, calm and dignified, unlike the oppressive quiet of days before. I boiled my potatoes on the stove. They were the most delicious food in the world. I ate slowly at my clean table, savoring each bite. I looked out the window, the one I had finally managed to unboard and clean. Beyond it stretched my overgrown yard, and among the tangled weeds, a few stubborn peony bushes still stood. Their dark red buds were just beginning to open. I thought that would be the end of it, that they, once crushed and exposed, would simply leave me to fix the mess they had made. But once again, I underestimated them. I forgot that a cornered creature doesn't seek forgiveness. It looks for one last chance to bite. About a week passed. During that time, I met my only neighbor, or rather, he found me. One morning, while I was hauling a bucket of water from the well, I heard a calm, steady voice behind me. Here, neighbor, let me help you. Turning that windlass isn't a job for a lady. I turned and saw a tall, lean old man with a gray beard and piercing blue eyes. With one effortless motion, he finished cranking the handle, lifted the bucket, and set it gently on the ground. "Curtis Baker," he said, extending a broad, calloused hand. "Live over there, 2 houses down. Last of the old guard around here." "Evelyn Reed," I replied, shaking his strong, steady hand. That's how our acquaintance began. Curtis, Uncle Kurt, as he asked me to call him, was a retired county commissioner. He was an old-fashioned man, quiet, thoughtful, and grounded. He never asked how I ended up here. He didn't need to. He had seen the expensive car that dropped me off and then drove away. He saw me alone, struggling to make this abandoned house livable, and he understood everything without a single question. He started helping me in small, steady ways. Some days he'd bring dry firewood. Other times, fresh milk from his goat. Occasionally, he'd just stop by in the evening to sit on the porch and talk about the weather or the chances for a good harvest. His presence brought a calm I hadn't felt in months. Around him, I didn't feel so alone. I felt safe. Then one morning, the peace shattered. I was watering my peonies when I heard the rumble of engines, several of them. A small convoy stopped near my house. 3 passenger cars pulled up, and people began to step out. I recognized them instantly. My cousin, Aunt Carol from Raleigh, with her husband, my late husband's nephew Darnell and his wife, and a few distant relatives I barely remembered except from weddings and funerals. Leading the group, like generals marching at the front, were Darren and Tiffany. Darren looked even worse than before, gaunt, twitching slightly around one eye. Tiffany, on the other hand, had changed entirely. She wore a plain dark dress, no makeup, and her hair tied neatly in a bun. Her expression was one of quiet sorrow as she held Darren's arm, supporting him as though he might collapse at any moment. Together they painted the perfect image, the grieving son and his devoted, suffering wife. They arranged the relatives in a semicircle, like witnesses to an execution. Then, at Tiffany's soft prompting, Darren began to speak. His voice trembled, not from nerves this time, but from practiced emotion. "Dear family, Aunt Carol, Darnell, thank you for coming," he began, sweeping a solemn gaze over the group. "We called you because a tragedy has struck our family. A great tragedy." He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. The relatives glanced at me with confusion and sympathy. "Our mother, Evelyn Reed, she's sick," Darren continued with feigned grief. "After her pneumonia, she began showing signs of mental illness. She forgets things, mixes up details. She's been imagining conspiracies, mortgages that don't exist. She doesn't even recognize us anymore. She accuses us of terrible things." I stood there, still holding the watering can, listening to this performance unfold in disbelief. They had decided to paint me as insane, to rewrite reality so their deceit would look like nothing more than the delusions of a sick old woman. Tiffany stepped forward, her tone angelic but hollow. "We wanted to get her treatment," she said, dabbing a dry corner of her eye with a tissue. "We searched for the best doctors, a good clinic, but she ran away. She found this abandoned house and hid here. She refuses help, blocked all our accounts so we can't pay for her care. We're terrified she'll hurt herself." Aunt Carol gasped, pressing her hands to her chest. "Evie, darling, what is this? Come home. You need proper treatment." The others looked at me with a mix of pity, fear, and subtle disgust. In their eyes, I could already see their verdict. Darren and Tiffany's plan was cruelly simple and devastatingly effective. Who would believe a lonely, aging woman living in a crumbling house over her respectable son and his caring, pregnant wife? I stayed silent. What could I possibly say? Any protest, any attempt to defend myself, would only confirm their story. Immediately, I felt the familiar symptom of the illness, aggression, a jarring response. And just when it seemed like everything was lost, that I had lost this final, dirtiest battle, I heard the soft creak of a gate behind me. "May I be nosy?" a calm voice asked. "What's this gathering about?" Everyone turned. Uncle Kurt stood on the path. He wore his usual work clothes but carried himself like a general. His clear blue eyes scanned the group, pausing at Darren and Tiffany before settling on me. "And you?" Tiffany demanded sharply, sizing him up. "Who are you?" "Me? I'm the neighbor," he replied evenly. "Curtis Baker. And who are you, nice folks, who came here to intimidate this woman with a whole crowd?" "We're her relatives," Darren snapped. "We came to rescue her. She's not right in the head. Uncle Kurt slowly approached and stood beside me. He wasn't looking at me directly, but I felt his steady presence. Not right in the head, you say? He squinted at Darren. Strange. I've been talking to Evelyn Reed for a week now, and I see a perfectly sane, clear-headed, and remarkably strong woman. A woman her own son brought out on her birthday and left in this shack like garbage. I saw it with my own eyes, the relatives murmured. Aunt Carol glanced at Darren uncertainly. I also see a woman, Uncle Kurt continued, his voice firm, who is turning this shack into a home all by herself, without any help. She lights the stove, cleans, tends the garden. Is that how crazy people behave? To me, that's how people behave when everything has been taken from them. But they can't take the most important thing, the will to live. He stepped closer to the delegation. And as for you two young folks, he said, shifting his gaze to Tiffany, you seem odd to me. You arrived in an expensive car, dressed to the nines, yet claim your mother cut off all your funds. How did you get here on your last dime? You don't look like grieving children. You look like con artists who came to shake down an elderly woman for her last bit of cash. Only instead of threats, you're using tears and lies. His words were clear, deliberate, and hit their mark. The relatives who had come with sympathy for Darren now looked at him and Tiffany with suspicion. Their carefully staged show was collapsing. Aunt Carol approached me. Evie, is it true he kicked you out? I nodded quietly. That was enough. Every lie shattered like a soap bubble. Whispers rippled through the relatives as they cast angry, judging glances at Darren and Tiffany. Darnell, the nephew, a large man, stepped forward. What in the world are you doing, you scumbag? He growled. Decided to drive your own mother to her grave? Darren backed away. Tiffany grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the car. Their public trial had become their public humiliation. They fled under the disapproving eyes of the very people they had brought as judges. One by one, the cars turned and drove away. Finally, only Uncle Kurt and I remained. Thank you, I whispered. He smiled into his gray beard. Don't mention it, neighbor. Telling the truth isn't help. It's a duty. I watched the dust from their cars settle on the road, and I knew it was over. They hadn't lost in court or at the bank. They had lost here, on this land, in front of simple people. This defeat was worse than any financial crash. It was moral bankruptcy, complete and absolute. The dust settled, and with it, the remnants of my past life. Since that day, when my relatives came to witness my shame only to have it become my son's shame, I never heard from them again. Marcus Jones, my loyal attorney, saw the case through to the end. The bank recognized the mortgage agreement as fraudulent, especially after several relatives testified about Darren and Tiffany's strange behavior and their attempt to declare me incompetent. All charges against me were dropped. I didn't bother to find out what happened to them after. I only know they faced criminal charges for fraud. They had to face the consequences of their actions on their own, without my help, my money, or my forgiveness. Their world, built on lies, collapsed, burying them in its ruins. And my life was only beginning at 63. Once all the legal matters were settled, the first thing I did was sell the condo on Peachtree Road, without regret. I visited it one last time to collect my most valuable possessions, the photo album, a few books, and Paul's old armchair. Walking through the empty, echoing rooms, I felt a wave of nostalgia. This place was no longer home. It had become just property, cold and foreign. My real home was now here, in this quiet, abandoned town. The money from the sale, combined with my secret savings, I invested in stable, if not highly profitable assets, just as Marcus advised. What it gave me most was certainty. The certainty that I would never again depend on anyone, that I could pay for my own medical care, firewood in winter, or a new roof when needed. I began building, not literally at first, but in spirit. I hired a crew from the nearby county seat, 2 capable, steady men. They replaced the roof, installed wooden windows, built a traditional hearth stove, and constructed a sturdy porch that no longer creaked. I didn't just supervise, I worked alongside them, fetching materials, painting, cleaning. At first they were surprised. Later they showed respect. Evelyn, you're something else. "Mitch," the foreman said. "You've got a backbone most men don't." I smiled. I hadn't realized I had one. All my life I thought I was soft, yielding, but the strength had always been inside me. It simply hadn't been allowed to show. Before my eyes, the house transformed. From a dark, gloomy shack, it became a cozy, bright cabin. I whitewashed the walls, hung simple gingham curtains, placed Paul's armchair in the corner, arranged my books on shelves, and the house came alive. It began to breathe. In spring, I turned to the garden. Uncle Kurt helped me remove diseased trees and lay out a vegetable patch. For the first time, I planted potatoes, carrots, and onions myself, caring for each sprout as if it were a child. And the earth, sensing that care, responded generously. My peonies, which I first saw then, grew into lush, blooming bushes that left me breathless. I remembered my grandmother teaching me embroidery as a child. I found the hoops in the old chest, bought thread and canvas in town, and spent evenings by the stove stitching simple patterns, flowers, birds, ornaments. My fingers remembered. This quiet, repetitive work soothed me and organized my thoughts. I no longer spoke to Paul's photograph. I felt him here, and I knew he would be proud. Uncle Kurt and I became true friends. We didn't pry into each other's souls, yet we understood one another perfectly. Evenings often found him at my porch for tea, brewed from herbs we'd gathered together. We sipped from earthenware cups, watched the sunset, and in that silence found more meaning than any conversation I'd had in a decade. Sometimes, I thought of my son, not with pain or resentment, but with compassion, as one might feel for a lost stranger. I had given him everything I could, but I could not instill what he lacked, a conscience. That was his choice, not mine. I let go, severing the last thread that connected us. He was no longer my responsibility, just a man who had once been my son. I am 65 now, sitting on my porch with a cup of tea made from herbs in my garden. The sun sets behind the woods, painting the sky in vivid colors. The air smells of grass and flowers. Firewood crackles in the stove. A stray kitten Vasya purrs on my lap. My hands are rough from gardening, nails unpolished, but these are the hands of someone fully alive. A person building her own life. Sometimes I think I should thank Darren and Tiffany. Without their cruelty, I might still be a shadow in someone else's life, never knowing my own strength. I would never have met Uncle Kurt, never seen my peonies bloom, never tasted water from my own well. They tried to bury me, and instead they gave me life. A real life. I take a sip of tea. Tart, fragrant, alive. I realize dignity isn't given by others. It isn't respect or recognition. Dignity is what you reclaim from fear, resentment, despair. What you take back when everything seems lost. And that quiet, hard-won victory, that is true happiness. That is true freedom. Did you enjoy my story? If you listened to the end, drop a number 1 in the comments. If you liked it, support me by liking the video or sending a small tip. I have many more stories like this on my channel. Subscribe and check them out. 2 new stories are on the screen now that everyone loves. Thank you for being here. See you in the next one. With love.